Hi, I'm Mary Wing Soares, here for another exciting episode of Agenda Item. With me is Tim Thompson, our town planner, and we're here to talk about what's going to happen in our January meeting.
Yes, we are, and as has been a trend, we are not having a meeting on January 3rd, the first meeting of the month. We again did not receive any new development applications by our deadline, so we've canceled that meeting. So the only items we'll be discussing this month will be on January 12th, and we have 3 items on the agenda. The first being a rezoning application associated with the freezer warehouse property on Route 28. The second is continued workshop discussion on the Woodmont Commons PUD master plan. And then lastly, a workshop on an impact fee methodology update that I've been working on for the last several months for the Route 28 western section of the corridor.
Now the rezoning, we heard a conceptual discussion last month about that.
We're talking about parcels located on Rockingham Road near the Triangle Mobile. This is map 15 lot 124 and map 15 lot 22. They're 2 adjacent parcels. The aerial photo that I have up shows the existing freezer warehouse facility set well back from Route 28. They were able to obtain the adjacent parcel to the east of that and to the north of the existing building. What they're hoping to do is a pretty good sized addition to the facility. Their existing warehouse is about 94,000 square feet, and they're proposing to add an additional 82,000 square feet to that facility. The reason for the rezoning is under our current zoning in this particular district, which is Commercial 2, there's a maximum building coverage requirement of 25%. If they were to move forward with their existing proposed expansion, that would bring them to 31.5% building coverage on the lot, which would require variance. The suggestion that staff had made to the applicant is, because this use is more of an industrial warehouse use, might be appropriate, given that there is industrial zoning in that area of Route 28, to look at rezoning the parcel to Industrial 1, which is more closely suited with the actual use that's taking place. In that district, there is not a maximum building coverage requirement, so that negates the necessity to go to the zoning board for variance. And we always try to recommend that we go administrative processes before we go the quasi-judicial route. So the zoning overview, as you can see, there's a good mix of both residential, commercial, industrial zoning in the area. This parcel is relatively uniquely situated. Again, as I mentioned, it's set well back from Route 28. It also abuts a large piece of protected conservation open space that was part of the mitigation for the Home Depot project back in the early 2000s. And there's a good size topographic hill feature that separates it from the nearest residential abutters. They are a relatively quiet operation. They're a very good taxpayer. We've been very successful in the community. They have this facility as well as one by the Dairytown line called Highwood Cold Storage. This addition that they're talking about was originally going to be built in the town of Hooksett, but we've been very active in our economic development efforts to try to keep them in town, and we hope that by moving forward with this rezoning that we can successfully maintain a very important taxpayer to the community, and we always like to see them flourish and expand within the community.
And, you know, we've heard many positive things about them. We've always heard that they're very good neighbors. So I know when they came before us and talked to us about this, the board was in consensus that we did not have any problems with the rezoning. So
yeah, I think some of the initial concerns that people might see at this, they might see this as a spot zoning because there's no immediately adjacent industrial development. But I think the reason why this doesn't fall in that category is, as I mentioned, there is a significant amount of industrial zoning within relatively near proximity to this, primarily near the Enterprise Drive location, as well as where Coca-Cola, Donovan Spring, all located very nearby this. And again, the use itself, it really isn't a commercial use, it's more of an industrial use. So from our perspective, it made sense to recommend that this be rezoned to industrial. And
when you look at this, there is just one. Is this this is an individual house?
That's an individual home, and immediately adjacent to the driveway to the west is also a daycare facility as well. They actually came to the board a couple months ago in anticipation of this, I believe. They had worked with the owner of the daycare to put up some additional fencing to help screen the area and prevent any of the children from getting in the way of the vehicle access to this facility.
Which is just one more point that they are such a good neighbor.
Yes.
So we're glad to, you know, hopefully help them out here. And then the workshop on Woodmont Orchards. Now, this doesn't seem to be going anywhere fast.
And I think that's kind of to be expected. This is a brand new ordinance. The town has not had a planned unit development yet. The ordinance is barely a year old. This is going to be the first utilization of that ordinance. And as I look through the submission key of all the requirements that are required to be submitted as part of a PUD master plan, in addition to the 6 required materials for the application itself, there are 25 additional required information items that all have to be provided in order for the planning board to make an informed decision on a project like this. I think at this point the proponents of the project have attempted to get some initial feedback on the overall concept from the planning board and from the public, both through their design charrette and with the 2 workshops we've held with the planning board. What I'm hoping that they move forward with in the next couple of months and the couple of workshops will be to start putting some more actual information into the project, as what they've really provided us right now is a very broad brush overview, the formatting of the written part of the plan, how they'd like to see the plan documents themselves laid out. I think it's now time to really start getting the information in there so we can start getting some back and forth discussion between the board and the applicant before this moves forward to an actual public hearing.
So specific information are going to include where the roads are going to be, what kind of housing is going to be on what streets,
Sure.
if there's going to be multi-residential, if it's going to be single residential, if there's going to be commercial, where this all is going to
All
happen.
that has to be, this basically is going to become the new zoning for this particular area. So they're going to have to not only show us what uses would be allowed in these areas, but they also have to show us in concept where the buildings are going to be located, where the streets are located, how parking is going to work, public services like fire, police, utilities, drainage, all of those have to be handled at this overview level in the master plan, but it doesn't stop at that point. If the planning board were to approve a PUD master plan for this particular project, that sets the framework. That now becomes what we use to evaluate future site plans and subdivisions. It does not relieve them from having to go through the standard site plan and subdivision process that any other project typically would in the community.
Right. So what we have to be concerned about is, of course, the neighbors, the abutters. We want to make sure that what they see is likened to what they have or what they expected. And I think these developers have said anything that's single family is going to look at single family, and then as they go in, they'll see something different.
The overall concept that they've shown us so far has really been that the lower density residential areas that mimic what our existing neighborhoods look like would be located around the periphery where they abut existing residential neighborhoods. So they're trying to transition from that existing acre and a half zoning that we currently have. And then as you get more towards the interior of the project, looking at some higher densities for some smaller lot single family, as well as some potentially some smaller multifamily units to provide a broad variety of different housing choices and options within the community. And then also looking at the town, what they're calling their center area, not necessarily a town center as we've discussed at the last planning board meeting, but
their
the village center, so to speak.
There you go.
Which would have municipal buildings, services, some commercial uses, restaurants, things of that nature. And then eventually, when and if Exit 4A were to happen, they would be looking at the east side of the highway for some more intense commercial development as that land goes into towards the town of Derry. So there are a variety of different things that still need to be looked at. The overall traffic impact is obviously a huge component of this. It is designed to be a walkable, pedestrian-friendly community, but obviously in a project like this, you are going to be seeing some significant traffic impacts, which is one of the main reasons why staff is so concerned in making sure that 4A happens, because without Exit 4A, we really don't see that this project a lot of this project would be viable without it.
Well, and I think the developers agree with you that they don't either. And so the timeline for that, we're looking at 3 or 4 years before we even know for sure? Or?
It all depends on how quickly they start getting information to the board. There is no statutory time limit until they actually submit their fee and request a public hearing. Then we get into some actual time frames for when the planning board would have to make decisions. But again, ultimately, they've stated up front from the very beginning that this is a 25 to 30-year project. The other part of that is going to have to be part of this is how they propose to phase this. What's going to happen first? What are the areas that they want to happen first?
Right.
And what's going to happen in year 3, year 5, year 10, and so on. So there are a lot of unanswered questions. The majority of questions still are unanswered at this point. There's still a lot of work to take place, and I think they're taking a very methodical approach to this, understanding that the town hasn't done this before. and they want to make sure that they do it right so that whoever comes next and utilizes this in other parts of the community, maybe even in the airport area, which is where this ordinance was originally designed to really take its effect, will be done in the same similar fashion.
Now, the only other area in our town where this could be done is the airport area, isn't it?
That's primarily where it would be. Any area, the way the ordinance is written is that if you have at least 100 acres of contiguous land and access to municipal public sewer and municipal water, you're eligible to utilize this section of the ordinance. There aren't many areas. The two primary areas are this area and the area south of the airport.
And the only other areas that might be would be orchards that are already preserved, right?
Not necessarily, because they wouldn't have the access to sewer. Most of our other orchards don't have access to sewer, whereas this is near I-93 and Route 102, where there is our existing sewer and access to the dairy treatment facility. It was always envisioned, just particularly on the east side where exit 4A is going to go in, that area would eventually get into the dairy treatment facility with public sewer. There is one other area that actually a developer has expressed some interest in potentially using this, and that's the area up north off of Old Dairy Road to the west, heading towards the city of Manchester, near where the Mill Pond development was started in construction. The developer of that project also owns some adjacent parcels that are in excess of 100 acres. So he may be looking at utilizing a PUD at some point in the future as well.
So he'll see, I'm sure everyone is watching.
Everybody's watching to kind of see how this process works and how it goes. And it's a learning process, I think, for both the developer and the town at this point as to how we make our way methodically through this process.
Well, when we asked what their timeline was as far as when they wanted to begin construction, one of them said, we'd like to have shovel to the ground in the spring, you know? That's not likely, though.
I don't know that it's likely, given the current pace of the process going through right now. I would say that that's highly unlikely.
Right.
I think that any developer worth his skin is going to tell you that I want to get the shovel in the ground as soon as humanly possible. I think that's a reasonable answer to hear from any developer. But I think the realistic expectation is that we're probably going to be looking at 6 to 8 to 9, 10, even 12 months before we get to a point where the PUD is approved.
And because this has been so conceptual, it's very difficult for the board, wouldn't you say, to give specific feedback because there
it's a lot to handle. It's a very large project. You're talking almost 700 acres of land. It's an awful lot to process where you're used to dealing with, you know, a 50-acre subdivision of 30 lots or a 20-acre piece of property for a site plan. This is a completely different animal, and it can be daunting. And I think breaking it down into chunks of different sections of this list of 25 things over the course of the next several months will hopefully make that process a little easier for the board to go through.
But before they can even come in with a site plan for one part of this, we have to approve this master plan. You have to approve a master plan. Okay. So we would encourage folks to come to our meetings. This second meeting, January 12th, will be another public workshop. And we'll continue to have workshops until they ask for a public hearing.
Correct.
Right? And we're happy to, host anybody who wants to come and talk to us about this.
And as always, if anybody has specific questions you're not comfortable bringing up at a public meeting, feel free to email either myself or Andre Garin, the Community Development Director, and if we can't find the answer, we'll get you to the person that can.
All right. Also, Woodmont Orchards their website is up and running.
Yep.
So you can go to the town website, and there's a link on there from the town website.
From the planning board page on our town website, there's a link to a Woodmont Commons PUD page where I've been compiling all the information they've been submitting as they've gone through the process thus far. And towards the bottom of that, I also have a link to the developer's new website, which is woodmontcommons.com.
So there's plenty of information out there. Please, avail yourself of that information. And we look forward to seeing you at our planning board meeting. Again, we only have one this month, January 12th, and hope to see you there. For agenda item?
Oh, we're not done yet.
Oh, we're not? I'm sorry. We still
have impact fees to talk about.
The impact fees, that's right.
As I had mentioned earlier, I've been working on this project probably for the last 6 months or so. It's a very daunting project to be handling as staff. This is something we've in the past have utilized Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission to do for us. What we've wanted to do was utilize some of the updated information we've had done by our engineering consultant, Stantec Consulting Services. So why are we doing this now? Right now, the impact fees for this section of 28 were last updated in 2001. There's been an awful lot of development within the corridor and near the corridor since then. We've had the updated traffic studies done by Stantec, as well as other development projects in that area. And probably the most significant item is that the costs of the improvements have increased significantly since 2001. We're 10 years later now, but our fees are still based on the 2001 cost of the improvements to the corridor. So the basis that I've tried to do this, and this is very similar to what I'll be telling the board on the 12th, is we're trying to utilize the existing basic methodology for the calculation of the impact fees that Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission did for us in '01. And then also utilize the corridor improvements that were done by DOT for the I-93 widening, the off-ramps, as well as the Stantec plans and studies that have been done. I'm hoping to simplify our impact fee calculations to a single per PM peak hour trip fee. Right now, there's a complicated matrix that, depending on where you are in the corridor, you pay a different impact fee depending on where you are versus somebody else. So I want to try to simplify that to a single fee so that it's a little bit more manageable, and the expectations are right up front for a developer before they come in to know exactly what the fees are going to be.
Okay, so for a layperson, are you saying that you take all of the costs that have incurred in the past 10 years and you add them all up and you divide them by the number of people that are on the road?
I do not.
Okay.
I'll talk a little bit about how the fee is calculated, but essentially the way we look at it is there's obviously existing traffic on the corridor.
Yes.
And there's a certain amount of background growth that's just naturally occurring because of development elsewhere in the community and in the region. What we can charge an impact fee for is those new traffic that's generated specifically by the development in the corridor itself that's adding new trips to the corridor. So the impact fee is actually based on those new trips from these development areas. And there's a certain percentage. The percentage in 2001 was 50% of the costs were based on the town and DOT covering the cost, and then 50% for the development. Though the cost has spiked significantly, because we've had development within the corridor, that ratio has actually changed, where now the town and state are responsible for 61% of those costs, and development is only responsible for 39% of those costs because there's already been development within the corridor, so there's less land there to be developed as we move forward into the future. The development areas themselves, again, I utilize basically the same system of numbering that Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission had used. So the areas you see highlighted in blue are those areas specifically that we're considering development areas within this section of the corridor. We also charge a fee for any project that's outside of this corridor that has traffic that impacts it, but they're not specifically counted as part of the development areas for the purposes of calculation.
Okay.
How we do this, we look at the base year of 2011 from our Stantec traffic study, and then for the development areas, what I looked at was the future land use based on our existing zoning for the area. For residential parcels, it's basically looking at a unit per acre for the developable portions of those lots. But those lots that might be potentially suitable for workforce housing, we've given a 25% density bonus to those just to try to keep it consistent with what might actually happen. We utilized the latest 8th edition Institute of Traffic Engineers trip generation rates and equations in order to determine what the actual formulas were for the traffic generation. We use a background rate of 1% per year, so we assume that 1% is going to increase regardless if any development happens here. And then the distribution, we use the existing Stantec traffic study. What that gets us is, for all the development areas, we plugged in a potential use. Some of these are ones we know based on concept plans that have been presented to the board. Other things are just based on what we assume to be the potentially highest impactful use for the particular property. We run a lot of spreadsheets and numbers and crunch some equations, and what it roughly comes out to is about 4,000 new PM peak hour trips that these development areas would generate on Route 28 within this section of the corridor. As I had mentioned before, the composition of it in 2021, which is our horizon year, 45% of that traffic is our existing volume, 16% is going to be the impact of background growth, which we have no control over, and then 39% of the traffic in 2021 would be from those development areas, assuming they're all built out at that point. We've updated the cost estimates. We now assume it's going to be $19.9 million to do all the improvements within that corridor of section. The breakdown, as I mentioned, is 61% for the town and the state, which is roughly $12.1 million. And then the development itself would pay 39%, or about $7.76 million. I've also included an average of 20 trips outside the corridor that would impact that, to try to mitigate some of the impacts of developments outside the corridor that aren't specifically studied, just to try to, again, account for what we know may be developing outside the corridor that will obviously impact, so that they're accounted for in the impact fee. And what we've done new this time around is, because right now, as I mentioned, we're still charging an impact fee that's based on 2001 costs, we assume, based on standard engineering practice, that costs are going to increase approximately 3.5% each year. So I'm actually going to recommend that the board include a cost escalation factor in the fee, so that every year after 2011 there's an increase to the impact fee, so that it's still relevant to the cost of the improvements.
Now, will there be any adjustment, though, should there not be that much of an increase?
If there's not that much of an increase, then obviously the impact fees would not be coming in at the same rate, and the improvements would not be needed. The way our impact fee system works today, and will in the future, is if any particular development triggers the need for those improvements, and they have to do those as part of their site plan as off-site improvements, whatever they spend on those off-site improvements get credited towards their impact fees. So if they do $300,000 worth of intersection improvements within the corridor, and their impact fee was $250,000, they pay no impact fee, because they did over that amount in the actual improvements. So what we've done is Stantec had broken down different intersections and roadway segments, and basically, as you can see, in 2010 we're estimating $19.9 million. With the escalations in 2015, that cost goes up to about $23.5 million. What that translates to in terms of the impact fee is a pretty big jump. Currently we're charging $912 per trip. We're proposing that go to $1,998 in 2011, and then again escalate based on that 3.5% increase in the construction costs, up to $2,313 by the year 2016.
So are these impact fees yearly fees that the businesses pay, or is it a one-time when they're developing
their project? It's a one-time fee payable before they occupy their new facility. It's intended to have them account for their contribution towards the impacts to the needed improvements within the corridor.
How is it that, you know, for say 20 years you have this business there and they've been utilizing that road, and the impact fee that we charge them really didn't cover that 20 years of utilization? How is it that we recoup that money?
We don't.
Okay.
The way the statute works for impact fees, you can only keep an impact fee in an account for 6 years. If you don't do your capital improvements within that 6-year period, that person can then request that fee be refunded back to them.
Yeah, and I know, and we don't refund back, so we always
try to make sure that we do the improvements.
We do our improvements.
So again, just to summarize where we were 2001 versus 2011, the fee increase is about 119%, but again, it's primarily because the cost of improvements have essentially doubled in the last 10 years. The cost breakdown has changed, and as I had mentioned, just the summary, in 2001, the town and state were responsible for 5.37, developers for 5.46, so roughly a 50-50 split. Now we're talking 12.1 and 7.7 million for the split. So,
okay, but when you say in 2011, it's just the potential of 19.9 million. We don't have.
We are not proposing to do those improvements. But ultimately, in the actual document itself, there is essentially what we envision the ultimate build-out of Route 28 to be in order to accommodate all of that traffic. These are the improvements that we foresee would need to be made. Therefore, here's the share that development should pay. The remainder of it is paid for by either the state or the town. And
they could be done along the way as a development comes in.
Again, anytime a particular site plan comes in, has a significant impact to an intersection, and it's determined that they need to do off-site improvements, the improvements get done then, so that basically absolves the town and the state from doing those improvements, and their impact fees are credited because they've actually performed the construction of those improvements.
Okay.
But again, it's been 10 years. We're woefully out of date, and because of that, we literally are out of funds within that section of, we have no impact fee money there left. So it's really important that we make sure that our fees are consistent with what the costs are, and that's really the main reason for moving this forward. So the meeting on the 12th will just be this basic overview for the board to make sure that what I'm doing is consistent with what the board envisions the impact fee system should be doing. Assuming that board is comfortable with it, we'll be bringing it to a hearing in February, and then ultimately the council would have to adopt a small minor amendment to the impact fee section of the ordinance to reference this new methodology.
Okay. And so, Tim, knowing that this has been out of whack for all this time, how come it took you this long to get there?
It's been a project that we've had in our CIP for the last several years, but has never been funded to utilize consultant services to do this project. It finally got to the point where Andrea and I looked at each other and said, you know, we need to do something. So
Right.
it's taken me much longer to do this on my own, in addition to all the other things I have to do on a regular day-to-day basis. So yes, we've saved the town some money in terms of what we would have paid a consultant, even though we did use the consultant with some funds from our existing budget to do some of the work for us. It's still a fraction of what it would have cost for us to do this, hiring a consultant to do the overall entire project. But it's taken us longer to do it that way because obviously I can't devote all of my time every day to do this with everything else that's going on.
Sure. So, you know, I guess that's the frustration of the economic times.
It is.
Because in the meantime, had we been able to pay a consultant, it would have been done more quickly. We might have been
We might have
collecting
been
these
recouping
fees, recouping these
for
fees.
projects that have happened
Right.
in the last several years.
So, you know, I'm trying to get a plug in here for a warning plug here that we shouldn't be cutting so deeply that we are, you know, cutting our nose to spite our face. Is that what it is?
I don't make political observations in my
Yeah,
position.
well, I always make political observations, so I have nothing to fear. So those are our 3 items
Those
that
are.
are on our agenda for January 12th, 2011. Please join us on Wednesday at the Planning Board and the town offices at 7 o'clock. Thank you for joining us for agenda item, and we hope to see you
Next month.
on the 12th. Yep.